Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something really relevant today? We're going to be looking at whether the U.S. tax code is actually, and I mean, this is kind of a wild thought, giving robots an advantage over human workers.
Yeah, it sounds like we're in some sci-fi movie, but this is a real question that economists are looking into.
Exactly. And we're diving deep into a 2020 paper to do it.
Published by the Brookings Institution, no less.
Right, by these economists, um, Acemoglu, Manera, and Restrepo. The paper is called, Does the U.S. Tax Code Favor Automation?
And they don't just ask the question, they actually built a whole economic model to figure out if it's true.
It's not about some, fear of technology, though, right? I mean, obviously, automation can be a good thing for productivity and all that. But are our tax policies accidentally making companies automate jobs faster than they otherwise would? I think that's a question a lot of our listeners are thinking about these days.
It's a huge question, no doubt. And their argument, just to lay it out there, is that the U.S. tax system, as it stands, might actually be encouraging companies to automate jobs, even in cases where, maybe from a bigger picture perspective, it might not make the most sense.
So how do you even begin to measure something like that?
Well, they did something kind of clever. They imagined every job as like this collection of smaller tasks, and some of those tasks are easier to automate than others.
Okay, I'm starting to see where this is going.
So their model, it looks at how taxes can influence which of those tasks within a job a company might choose to automate, and then what happens to the workers who were previously doing those tasks.
So it's like taxes are changing the game, and we're trying to figure out who's winning and who's losing.
And a key part of that game is the effective tax rate, not just income tax, but how capital and labor are taxed differently.
So are we talking about how buying a robot is taxed differently than, say, hiring a new employee?
Exactly. And they found that since the 1990s, the effective tax rate on equipment and software has really gone down, thanks in large part to those depreciation deductions.
Oh, right, the tax breaks companies get for investing in capital equipment.
Exactly. But here's the thing. During that same time period, the effective tax rate on labor pretty much stayed the same.
So it's become, what, cheaper to buy a robot than to hire a person, at least from a tax perspective.
That's the trend they highlight.
Makes you wonder, does that make companies more likely to automate, even if it means replacing workers, just because it makes more financial sense?
A key question for sure, and their research suggests that yes, this tax gap between capital and labor does seem to be nudging us towards more automation than if things were, say, neutral.
So let's say we could hit rewind on the tax code, knowing what we know now. What would these economists recommend?
Well, they actually talk about optimal tax rates, like what would be the best way to set tax rates to get the best outcomes for everyone, not just, companies trying to automate everything.
Right, because I think when some people hear tax robots, it sounds like, oh, you're anti-technology, but it's more about finding that balance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is they're suggesting that ideally taxes on capital like machines and software should actually be higher than they are now. And taxes on labor, what people earn, should be lower. Kind of the opposite of what we've been seeing.
It's like we're flipping the script.
Right. But it's all about trying to find that balance point, right? Making sure everyone benefits. And get this, they actually suggest an automation tax.
Okay, now there's a phrase that'll get people talking. What does it actually mean? Like, are we taxing every robot that comes off the assembly line?
Well, not literally, no. Think of it more like it's a way to make sure companies are thinking about the whole picture when they automate, including what happens to the workers. If a company can just automate a bunch of jobs, let people go, and not really feel it financially, that obviously has ripple effects. The automation tax is one way to address that.
And what they found is that this kind of tax could actually be a win-win, leading to more jobs overall.
That's what their models show. They're saying an automation tax could mean a lot more jobs and even a bigger share of income going to workers, not just company profits.
So how would this actually work? Would it hurt businesses?
Well, they looked at a few different ways to do it. One idea is to combine the automation tax with lower taxes on other things companies invest in. And you know what? When they ran the numbers on that, it actually made the positive impact on jobs and wages even bigger.
So it's more about strategically adjusting things rather than just like tax the robots.
Yeah, exactly. It's about changing the incentives, right? And the important thing here is this isn't just theory. They based all of this on how the U.S. tax code has actually changed.
So there's real world data backing this up.
Exactly. They saw this trend where capital gets more and more favorable tax treatment, and at the same time, workers were getting a smaller and smaller share of the income pie. So, It really makes you think, if our tax policies have been contributing to that, what can we do differently?
It really makes you think, are we at this turning point where we need to make some choices about the future?
I think so. There are no simple answers here, right?
Yeah, and this is a topic that gets people fired up. People have strong opinions about automation and jobs.
Definitely, But just having the conversation is important, even if we don't all agree on the answers.
Absolutely. I think even just realizing that, hey, maybe our tax policies are having some unintended consequences, that's a big deal.
Totally. We're not trying to tell anyone what to think here, just giving everyone the information to figure things out, right?
Yeah, we're all kind of figuring this out together. Like, how do we want to live and work in this world where things are becoming more automated? And this paper gives us some really interesting ways to think about it.
For sure. It's like maybe we've been playing a game where the rules were a little bit tilted and we just didn't realize it.
And now we have a chance to maybe level the playing field a bit, right?
That's a great way to put it. Although it's important to remember this is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle, right?
Like, the economy is complicated.
Super complicated. They had to make a lot of assumptions in their model, right? About like how sensitive people are to changes in taxes, all sorts of things.
And those assumptions, I'm guessing, they can change the outcome.
Of course. And there's no way to predict exactly how this would play out in the real world.
It's a good reminder that economics, well, it's not exactly like physics, right?
Definitely not. But even with all the uncertainty, I think this kind of analysis is super helpful. It gives us some ways to think about these really complicated problems.
Like, okay, here's a map. We still might get lost, but at least we have some idea of where we're going, right?
Exactly. And it's a call to action for policymakers, to think carefully about these choices because they have huge consequences.
To have those tough conversations and really consider all the options, right?
Yeah, and to think about the long game, not just the short term.
Because these choices we make today, they're going to affect the world of work for a long time to come.
No doubt.
Well, if you're listening to this, we hope this has given you some things to think about, some questions to ask. Keep learning. Keep exploring these ideas.
Because we're all in this together, right? This is the future of work, and we all have a stake in it.
And the more we know, the better prepared we'll be. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
It's been fun.